Fragments of Silicon.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me, as always, regular crew. Let's get to the news. Let's see. Twilight, why don't you start us off this week?
All right, well, to start things off, I accidentally broke my sliding screen door early yesterday morning.
Fun.
Yeah, I don't have myself to blame. I was on a ball and going to work, and I went back to grab some water to water my plants before I left, and I forgot I hadn't opened it, and I smacked right into it. Yeah, but landlord's gonna fix it. They already had the guy who usually works on stuff for him look at it, and he's gonna get it replaced. I'm hoping maybe tomorrow, tomorrow or something like that. I have to wait and see. Besides that, work's been going well, and I've been playing one of the games for this week, and that's about it.
Okay. Golix?
Well, as anyone who listened to the reviews this past weekend will know, I was very sick over the weekend. Thankfully, that's mostly gone away, and now I'm just got a little bit of a tickly throat that makes me cough sometimes to varying degrees of awfulness. And my nose is a little bit stuffy, but, I can think, so that's good. Unfortunately, everyone else in my house is now sick.
I'm like, I'm sure it's a coincidence.
Apparently it's going around other places too. It's not just me, but yeah. Anyway, not much going on in video games on account of I have been trying to mostly avoid excessive. I mean, I've had my computer on night mode for less eye strain to prevent headaches, and hadn't really been trying to avoid video games to avoid headaches, because one of the worst parts for me being sick is when you get headaches, because I get bad headaches anyway, and when I'm sick, they're worse. That said, I'm preparing to play Skee-Ball on the Wii U, or not Wii U, Switch. I'm sure there's Skee-Ball on the Wii U, but not that one, for this weekend, and I will probably try to use that on the actual TV just in case there's motion controls, because if it's Skee-Ball, there probably should be. So you will not escape my essay on Skee-Ball. I'll try to trim it down to a reasonable length.
Right. So,
other than that, the weather's actually been pretty nice.
Okay. Anyway, Petty, you're up.
Well, the big thing is, I saw the surgeon on Tuesday, and he says that it doesn't need the brace anymore. So
That's good.
That
yeah,
means you're stair certified.
Yeah.
That's good.
Though I've still been having problems with my knee being unstable, so I need to contact his office and see if he wants me to use one of my other braces.
Clearly, you just need to get really, really good at hopping on one leg.
And yeah, just kind of waiting on stuff now. Physical therapy is still kind of a pain.
Right. How much more physical therapy do you have?
Currently have scheduled till sometime in mid-October, I believe. And then we'll see if I need more than that.
All right, then.
As far as
anything-
gaming stuff, not a whole lot. Still been playing Final Fantasy 14, and just been kind of playing some of the games they have on the PS4 downstairs.
Indeed. Right. So if that's it, it's my go.
Hmm.
Nothing really to speak of this week in terms of, like personal anecdotes. Which is good. Yeah, no news is good news. Let me see. Gameplay wise, I have a rant on one of this week's games because they got a little too clever. More on that on Sunday. And really, that's about it in terms of things and stuff going on this week. For me, I suppose I should mention that Mac has resurfaced, sort of like he's been posting stuff on YouTube.
Hmm.
Now,
So we know he's not dead and still has plans, which is probably a consequence of breathing on for him.
Yes. So, he's posted some behind the stuff of his, animated series, on his channel. So if you want to go check that out. Anyway, so merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And this week we are welcoming Shawn Sackenheim of the Delisted Games blog.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. How are you doing tonight?
I am okay. It's been, when we scheduled this, I could not have guessed that this week would be so eventful in my life. So it's been kind of hectic, but I'm happy to be here and recording.
I'm like, is that like on a personal level, or is it, with the blog stuff?
Oh yeah, just personal stuff. Like we're staying in a hotel tonight. I came back home tonight just to be in the house to record this because we had some mold cut out of a wall in our house, so we're technically supposed to be out for 48 hours, but I'm risking lung infection by being here. It's how much I care.
That's good to know. I'm like,
I'm committed.
Not the first time we've had that this season. Anyway, so we usually like to get started by asking people what got them interested in video games. Usually that's on a game dev level, but I guess in this case it's a bit more informal since you're more on our side of the equation than But anyway, what got you interested in video games?
It's pretty much, I think, kind of the standard like gamer type of history. Like, just started playing NES and Atari 2600 and Atari PCs, and NES was where it like really took off in my childhood, and just kind of been playing games ever since, and made dumb flyers and fanzines just for myself when I was a kid. And once the internet came around, I've written for a couple different sites, and nothing major. Mostly what I would just call personal stuff over the years. And so Delisted Games is pretty much like the biggest thing that I've ever been involved with.
Yeah. And I suppose the question that comes to mind right now is, what made you want to start chronicling Delisted Games?
It was probably 2015 on YouTube. And I think I had just gone through my Xbox 360 and saw, like the usual suspects, like Scott Pilgrim's a big one, and was like, oh yeah, this game's gone. Like I should do a video of this. And the more of those that I posted, the more comments that I got from people saying, well, how can I get this? And so eventually I got tired of replying with the same answer, like every time somebody commented on the same video. And I thought I should just start a site that keeps track of this. So originally it was supposed to be like a site like, can I stream it? Like it would have been, can I play it? But it kind of turned into more of like a history, not a history, but like what it is, like a database of what you can't play anymore, which is ironic to say. have to say, unfortunately.
I suppose, though, in most cases, it's more what you can't buy anymore. At least, sort of can't buy. I suppose for those who might not know what the delisting of games is, games no longer being sold on digital platforms. Or digital platforms vanishing entirely.
Yeah, it's a really hard one to try and keep track of every game on a whole marketplace that doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
It's like, I mean, most famously the Wii everything online store marketplace with the Wii went dead. What, this year?
Gosh, yeah, I think it was January 2019 was the last time you could buy anything.
Yeah, which is probably the biggest digital loss yet in terms of.
It's the most the most visible one. Like there are plenty of old PC game portals that have gone away, but yeah, like a Nintendo offering with Nintendo games on it that you can't get in any form if you didn't already have it.
Right. It's
huge.
Yeah.
Although at least I think those still work if you do have them, because that's the second stage.
But if something happens to your Wii, you can never get them back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you can still re-download, but they've said eventually that will go away too, and especially like really bad have not set a time frame for it, and probably never will. It'll just stop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, unfortunately, it's like it's not something that people are paying attention to.
Yeah, we're getting there, but like the more titles that happen, and that's another reason for the site, like just to have that number on the front page, like here's 700 some games that in one capacity or another you can't play anymore, and there's so many more that I haven't gotten to yet.
Well, yeah, it's like, I mean, that's the thing about losing the Wii Online stuff, because it's like that had games exclusive to the WiiWare, or in the case of the Virtual Console, that service had games you could only download from that specific Virtual Console.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Rondo of Blood was only available for download on the Virtual Console. It's not the only way you can get the game. It's like, I think that I'm trying to think if that was one of the ones released for the PlayStation 4.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I think it's in that most recent Castlevania collection.
Yeah, but other games aren't so lucky. Like a lot of the TurboGrafx 16 games that were only for that, and the Master System games and so on and so forth, you could only get in that specific Virtual Console. And there are other quirks that have developed. The curious case of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So, yeah. Well, it's like I said, the lack of availability in terms of digital distribution is a surprisingly nuanced one, because Sonic 3 and Knuckles is actually available for download. Like right now, you can access it. Like it's still part of the Steam Genesis collection. And from all accounts, this seems to be the last time that this game was able to be released. Because it hasn't shown up in like the modern day, the modern consoles versions of this Sega Genesis package. Sega hasn't made it a part of any of the other classic endeavors, Sega Forever, or the Switch, the Sega Force. I don't know. Like I said, Sega's got so many of these; it's hard to keep track of.
Yeah, it's not in the Genesis Mini either.
Yeah, so this has led to a lot of speculation as to why this particular game or games has not reappeared in any sort of digital form, whether it be remade or original. And nobody can, nobody can pinpoint the rationale. It could be music rights. maybe code rights, maybe something else. But it's also compounded by the fact that the game is still available on Steam, like right now. It hasn't been pulled from there.
Could the lock-on technology be difficult to emulate with different
no
hardware?
No.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Sonic 3 and Knuckles has been emulated time and again since like the Sonic Mega Collection.
Mhm.
So
I didn't think it was likely, but it's at least worth ruling out.
I'm like, it's not a cause because you can play the full Sonic 3 and Knuckles on a variety of platforms, when this thing was re-released, including the Steam version. It's like specifically Sonic 3 and Knuckles, as opposed to like Sonic 3 and Sonic, you could also play them separately in like collections and so forth, but it's just one of the more curious cases of rights quirks. I mean, because sometimes why a game goes into digital oblivion is obvious. Like we got DuckTales Remastered being displayed on the screen, and why this game has gone into the void is pretty obvious. It's because it's a licensed title. And also keep in mind, licensed titles are pretty broad in their definition. It's not just based off of a popular television or movie. For example, Codemaster titles. Codemaster titles go out of print or go delisted pretty regularly. Mainly because they make a lot of licensed racing games. And licensed racing games, they are licensed products as well, and they have a limited shelf life. This is why you can't get like the grid games, earlier grid games, earlier dirt games, Toka, the list goes on. Anyway, I suppose, recentering around a question is, how do you keep track of, obviously it's, a large task, but do people send you tips on what's gone delisted?
Yeah, I have a submission form. It's just a Google form page where anybody can put in there's a lot of options there. Like if you want to do the work and find out is it on PlayStation, Xbox, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, PlayStation Portable, the list of checkboxes is pretty long, but you can just go there and put in I know this game, I can't get this game, and then submit it. And then it comes into a spreadsheet that's publicly visible so that hopefully before people submit a game, they double check the spreadsheet and they double check the site to see if it already exists. And then sometimes someone will submit one game, and then in me doing research, it'll lead to another game from a developer. And as I'm researching that, I see oh, well, this was this publisher, and okay, so now these 4 games from this publisher are gone all in the same year, so it looks like it's related to this publisher going out of business. So people can use that form, or lately people have been just DMing on Twitter. And then I just kind of compile everything in a personal Google Doc for myself, which is where I do all the research before I put it on the site, because I've lost a lot of stuff over the years in WordPress, thinking that it was, saving, and then all of a sudden it's lost.
I'm sure there's a certain irony to that.
Google hasn't done me wrong just yet.
Oh, that's good. I'm now, what do you consider to be delisted? Is it a game completely vanishing from the ether, or is it from a specific store?
For me personally, where it all started is I've always been more of a console player. So it started with Xbox 360 and PS3 and Wii, because those were really the first that had the huge marketplaces of games that now that we're 5, 6, 7 years later are several of them are dropping off just for being old, not even licensing.
Right. I mean, more a game that has multiple versions, and one of those versions is vanishing. For example, in case you missed the news, if you want to pick up Bayonetta 1 and 2 for the Wii U digitally, you got about 2 days, maybe one. These versions are getting delisted different days depending on the region.
Yeah.
But they're all getting delisted in about a day or two with one another. And
Yeah,
it's
tomorrow.
Yeah,
September 19th, I should say.
Yeah, I think it's already happened with Japan.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, if you want to get Bayonetta 2 for the Wii U and you want to own it on the eShop, you got to do it in the next couple of hours, for example. But it's also worth noting that Bayonetta 1 and 2 aren't going to be unavailable because digitally because they're on the Switch. So, exactly, I'm guessing you would list these as like partially delisted or like delisted for the specific console?
Yeah, each page on the site there are some placeholder ones still that don't have as much information, but I try anymore not to post a game until I've had time to fill it out. So each page has a table with where it was released digitally, when it was released, when it was delisted, and on which platform. And then there's also an available section on most games where I will link to, like, if it's still on PlayStation, here's the links to get it in most of the major different territories. Or if it's on Steam, a lot of stuff will disappear on consoles but still be on Steam because the developer itself can take over as the publisher easier on Steam than on Xbox 360.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not discriminating like when it's a game that's only been delisted like one version or one platform. A lot of cases anymore, it's just what gets submitted to the site because a community of people can keep an eye on a lot more things than just I can. Because right now, I barely have time to look at Twitter. I barely have time to keep up with news headlines. So it definitely helps having people out there like throw things my way.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's not helped by the suddenness of a lot of games to go delisted.
Yeah, it's surprise to me too, almost every time.
Yeah. For example, it just happened today. A game called Active Aggression Reboot Edition has been delisted at the request of a publisher, and it just like happened.
Wow.
For example. Yeah, it's like getting a warning about these delistings is more the exception than the norm, unfortunately. In the cases of where we get a notification of a game being delisted, do you report about that?
Yeah, I would love to be able to post everything that anybody announces ahead of time. It just unfortunately doesn't happen all that often.
Yeah. Makes sense. Considering once again, we don't always get the whole, hey, DuckTales Remastered is getting delisted. And it's also, if we do get a warning, it's like days ahead.
Yeah, usually.
Or
if a game's getting shut down, like a multiplayer game's getting shut down, they usually are, people are getting better at, giving advance notice and saying we're going to do a bunch of fun stuff before the end, which is really great to see.
Now, in terms of like multiplayer and MMORPGs, do those get their own sections?
They all just fall under whichever platform it would be on the site. It wasn't actually something that I planned on when I first started the site because it was so console focused and then Steam focused. And I've never been a huge multiplayer MMORPG person myself. So it didn't occur to me right away to make a separate section. So yeah, everything is kind of treated at like on the same level. Like it's a game that in some capacity people can't play anymore. Well, in some capacity, the majority of people can't play anymore.
Right. But see, the thing of it is, this is a phenomenon that actually predates digital distribution.
Oh, yeah.
because there are a lot of MMORPGs, for example, from the early 2000s. Like the time that the original EverQuest got popular, or that you can no longer play. Like for example, Nox. This is a MMORPG action role-playing game that was put out by Westwood Studios and Electronic Arts, and you can no longer play it. And it's like, and this thing went defunct well before like even Steam came onto the equation. Yeah. And there are all sorts of examples like this on the PC.
Yeah, I think the biggest one recently was WildStar.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
But, another like long-term example were the Ashron Call MMORPGs. Those lasted for a long time, and then they no longer were able to justify themselves. And it's like, and it's not necessarily even that these games are unplayable. It's once again, they're unplayable by the undedicated, because, and it's not even just like complete games. Like a lot of multiplayer has gone defunct. Because a lot of multiplayer games were powered by dead services. GameSpy.
Yeah, GameSpy. Yep.
GameSpy, Xfire, stuff like that.
I'm like, it's like going all the way back to like the Microsoft Zone powering.
Oh God.
Like, but I mean, this is something that like Age of Empires faced for a long time. It's like those games were powered. Their multiplayer was powered by this dead lobby system, and in order to get them, you could get a multiplayer system going, but it was really hard until the Steam re-releases came out. Like, of course, it was kind of hard to get any multiplayer gaming going in the late 90s. That's neither here nor there. As soon as my question out of all of this is, how would you tackle something that's, like partially dead? Like it has no longer, like the multiplayer servers are down, but the game itself can be still accessed. There are a lot of games like this on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. You can still, if it has a single player, you can still play it, but multiplayer you can't.
Right. Or even there's a lot of stuff that doesn't have leaderboards, but the game is still complete. That is, I mean, I would still add it to the site and stipulate that. I don't think there are a whole lot on there right now that are just like, oh, the multiplayer is gone, but the single player is still there. Especially like, I don't want to play down any game and say like, oh, it's just the multiplayer and it wasn't that popular. But I personally stuck more with complete games. Yeah. And then like if a multiplayer is shutting down and they announce it ahead of time, reporting that like a news article.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. Let me see. What about games that get relisted? I know, not as common, but it's happened. Like for example, Alan Wake has come back from the void.
Yeah, that's another eventuality that I didn't plan for. Ever thinking that, oh, this game could come back. Like they would update Mafia 1 and 2 and take out the song they didn't have the music rights to anymore. And then all of a sudden it just reappears years later. Those, since they were delisted, this is where it gets a little tricky. Like, since they were delisted and I had them on the site, I do update them. So the title, they'll still be on the site. They still appear in search, but they say relisted in brackets at the end of the name. So you can see like what has come back and what had been gone. And then I add like an update at the top of the page to say, what happened when it came back, if you can tell for sure, like exactly which date. And then update again, like that information at the top of the page where you can get it now. And so the way that WordPress works and the way the site works, if I take all the platforms off from the post that it was delisted on, it disappears from the site. So it still stays like if it was only delisted on Xbox 360, it still appears under Xbox 360, but the title says relisted. And one thing I don't know if I'll ever have the time to get to, just because there's so many games that are gone, is going back and adding games that are available now that were gone ever at one point, because it's even more work and even harder to pin down.
No doubt. And also, these days we're starting to run into, how do I put this, nefarious reasons for games getting delisted. Like, probably the chief example are the Disney platformers, specifically like The Lion King and Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
These are two games that were available for about $10 a piece on GOG and Steam. And then, like, during the summer, they got mysteriously pulled. And as it turns out, they got pulled because, well, they're re-releasing them.
$20 more.
Yeah. I mean,
and it's not even the good version of Aladdin, I think.
It's got a lot on there. Like, it's an appreciable package if you were a fan of those, but it's not like, it doesn't quite feel worth it like the Disney Afternoon Collection does.
Well, it's like the Disney Afternoon Collection was different. Like, that was more of a labor of love.
Yeah.
There are different intentions powering the Disney Afternoon Collection, because that was a project by Digital Eclipse, who have gone the preserving history route with their projects, versus, first of all, like, they're only re-releasing Aladdin and Lion King. The Jungle Book also got pulled, but is nowhere in sight. It is being presumed that Disney did this because, we got the live action remakes of Aladdin and Lion King this year.
Right.
So, let's re-release the old games. Now, this is less of a problem on the consoles because, the current generation of consoles never got Aladdin and the Lion King. So, in those cases, this is the first time these games are hitting those platforms, which is another problem of digital distribution, especially with old games. The chief examples is no Virtual Console on the Nintendo Switch, no PlayStation Classics on the PlayStation 4. So, it's all very vexing. Like, now, speaking of such things, does your site include, I hesitate to use the like streaming service, but I'm trying to think of another word, like the whole Nintendo Online thing. Like, how would you cover those?
Like
Game Pass or. Like anything that has a game on it that you don't buy, but you can access with a subscription service.
Yeah, that I have not gotten into, because that's another whole, keeping track of everything on PlayStation Plus as it comes and goes could be a full-time job for somebody.
No doubt. I mean,
there's a few cases where there's some EA stuff that you can still get in, EA Access, whatever it's called. Gosh. So when a game's delisted somewhere else, I'll mention, it's available there. But then again, that's something I don't have the time to keep up with every month to see if it disappeared again. So sometimes people will submit something or mention on Twitter like, oh, hey, this isn't available on here anymore. And so I'll go update the page and try and figure out when it disappeared and say, okay, here's one more place you can't play it.
So how long have you been doing I guess actually my question is, how much longer do you think you'll be able to keep the site up to date? Because I know how the site works. It's more, these are questions for the audience. People who not necessarily be familiar with the site. Anyway, anyway, you mentioned a lack of time keeping up with the delisted games and all that. But, the question I'm getting at is, do you think you'll still have time for all of this? Or, do you foresee the blog itself going defunct?
Well, I will do whatever I can to keep what's there online, and I mean, just kind of accept that as we go forward. Unfortunately, for right now, like it'll become more and more impossible for one person or even a community of people to keep up with everything, because almost anything that's released nowadays could go away.
Yes, and an aspect we haven't really talked about, like I said, there are a whole bunch of these aspects that are becoming more and more of a problem. And another one is physical releases. So, the big complaint about digital releases is, once it's gone, it's gone. But here's the part that people don't necessarily know about. This is going to happen to physical games now as well, because games aren't put on the discs or the cards anymore, or only one of them, or only part of them.
Right, like version 1.
Yeah, or like with the Nintendo Switch, like there are tons of examples of a game needing a very large download, or like the Legend of Spyro Reignited trilogy. Only one of those is actually on the card. The other two you have to download. On the PC, Metal Gear Solid 5, all that's on the game disc is like the Steam executable.
Yeah.
This is the problem we're running into in the current generation of consoles and game releases. Ironically, its preservation efforts are probably better on the indie side because of stuff like limited run games and the like. Because, if a game was released on the Xbox Live Arcade, with a few exceptions, it was probably only released on the Xbox Live Arcade. It's like, and the question leading up to all this is how are you going to catalog, like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, which is not dead, or delisted necessarily, but is unplayable because of the DRM.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to decide when to put that on there, and like what capacity to put it in. I mean, it would still qualify. I just don't think I've gotten around to that one. Yeah.
Once again, it's understandable. I mean, that's the unfortunate reality. So much has already gone delisted, and so much has gone delisted without not necessarily anybody noticing it, but how many people were paying attention to like the Xbox Live indie section before that vanished?
I was. Turns out. And the PlayStation. Gosh, I can't even remember the official title now, but basically the Xbox Live indie games of the PlayStation Vita,
the PlayStation Minis.
That also there's actually a lot of minis that are still around, but the Vita had a whole separate Android based marketplace that shut down, and I don't think many people ever paid attention to it except me.
Insert joke about anybody having a Vita.
Yeah,
fair enough, but as it happens more and more, it's going to be more important to more people. So, and that's part of what the site is about, is just getting the word out there about how many there are, and which, of the more major titles there are, to make it a bigger deal to people than to just go, oh, well, this was a crap game. Nobody played it, so it deserves to be gone. Like, no game deserves to be gone.
Yeah, I'm like,
every game should at least have the chance to exist, to be reviled.
See, now I'm thinking about all of the like actually objectionable games, and I know they should still be archived or something.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, that gets into the whole, hate speech games on Steam,
Yeah.
which is its own can of worms. But you moved us into a direction that I do want to talk about before we end this.
All right.
And that's like the grand exalted poop delisted games, and that's mobile devices. Have you covered any mobile platforms yet?
I personally cannot. There's just a million, hundreds of thousands of apps and games that have come out for iOS and Android before I had either of those phones and even thought of that possibility. So it seems like something a staff of people it would take to keep up with.
I'm like, you probably need as many people as looking, developing apps on the App Store to keep track of that.
Yeah.
Because,
because the way that Apple and Google and BlackBerry and Nokia could pull games for any reason, people may not even have. I didn't think about that possibility when I played like the first cell phone game I ever touched.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just because the OS updates and the OS updates and breaks the game.
For example, while it was alive, I was playing Digimon Lynx because Cyber Sleuth wasn't on a platform I had mostly, but that closed down recently, and now they're doing a new game that seems to be more aggressively monetized and changes some things that I'm not interested in as much. So there are plenty of things like that where the games are designed pretty much to have events for a certain amount of time, and then they'll stop supporting it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Finally, I would like to ask, do you make special designations with games like PT or Darkspore? Any game that you have on the blog, but you can't like play anymore in any capacity.
There's a separate tag and a separate page on the site for extinct games, which to me it's still you might be able to. It used to be a little more broad, but I think I've dialed it in more recently. That is like a game, especially an MMO where not even fan servers exist, or the source code was never released, or no one reverse engineered it. Like you literally cannot log in, you can't load up. You couldn't get past a title screen or something if you tried to play these games. So
the games with always online DRM that have servers that can't be checked, like Darkspore.
Yeah.
Is also extinct.
Yeah. Yep. And a lot of, like you said earlier, Xbox Live Arcade games that only ever came out digitally, only on that platform. You can't get that would be extinct. So I thought it jumps out at people to hear like, oh God, I know what extinct means, and now this game is. Really can't get a hold of it.
Yeah, I'm like, now one might, and it does depend on the platform, but even when a game gets delisted, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't get it anymore. For example, I'll explain it. Like Steam codes don't have an expiry date, at least as far as my knowledge is. So if you get a Steam code for a delisted game, that should still work, and that's about the closest the digital landscape has to an aftermarket. And do you chronicle that as well?
There's a lot of stuff that is, well, there's not, I don't think I have any games that are on the site where I've found I'll try to link to Steam keys. I don't go through was it G2A? Like those sites, like I'll see, usually it'll be like, it used to be Best Buy and GameStop.com. They would sell keys too for games. But now mostly like I'll check Amazon and see if they are reselling keys still and link to that. But I don't engage a lot with that aftermarket part of it.
Understandable, given the shadiness of some of the right. So I'll see if my colleagues have any other questions at this point.
Sure.
I think I'm good.
I'm pretty good, but I do appreciate the work you do, because
Thank you.
it's important that people remember stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another part of another aspect of the site that I originally had in mind was like a place to come and like post a comment and just like commiserate, like pour one out kind of for your game, like a game you loved that, people might hate on, but here it is. Like, I sometimes say running the site is like asking people to hang out in a cemetery with them. It's like, come, let's all gather around and talk about all these dead things.
Mm-hmm.
I can see the correlation. All right, Twilight.
I'm good, but like Alex, I appreciate what you do.
Thank you. It's good to
Hi.
hear.
Indeed. Yeah. So, Shawn, thank you for taking time out of
You're welcome.
with us today. Always good to hear about preservation efforts. We've talked to other people on like the other side of the equation, people who are bringing back old games, but I'm glad that somebody is chronicling the games that have gone into digital oblivion.
Yeah. It's I couldn't reverse engineer a game to bring it back to life, but I can at least do some research, do some writing, and hopefully put the information out there in a not opinionated way. Just like, here's the facts.
All right then, Petty Fan, play us to the next segment. All right. So welcome to the topic of discussion. This is the point where we talk about a gaming related subject not related to the interview. And this week we are talking about Age of Empires. So for those who've been, listening to the show in recent weeks, you know that this particular game series we were supposed to talk about 3 weeks ago.
Something like that.
But has been delayed because various real world ripped from the headlines things have happened. And we finally reached a week where nothing has overwhelmed our desire to talk about this particular thing. Although I guess it's more mine because I think I'm the only one here who's not a hardcore fan, but I enjoy the Age of Empires games. Glad
I've
they've
never been able to get into even remotely 4X style games. They just take too much time and.
Yeah, they're not 4X games. They're real-time strategy games. There is a difference.
Fair enough. I'm not good at those either, though.
Yeah. It's like, and indeed, like one of the key differences is that whole real-time versus turn-based. But anyway, Age of Empires is not just like, it's one of the RTSs. There. It's one of the games that people think of when they think of RTS games. It's right up there with Command and Conquer and StarCraft and Warcraft and all that stuff. So much so that it's had a second and third life. Even post heyday.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Age of Empires games were originally crafted by Relic Entertainment. Up until, Age of Empires 3 expansion packs, because, Relic did all of the Age of Empires releases up till like the third Age of Empires 3 expansion pack, which was done by Big Huge Games. That's mainly because I think by that point they were making Halo Wars. There we go. But yeah, it's like the Age of Empire, like Age of Empires 2 in particular is renowned as like the god king of RTSs, due to a lot of factors, mainly because it's balanced, it has a lot of civilizations, it's like, and yeah, it's like it's like Age of Empires is all of that, but I think its setting is also another reason why the games have lasted this long. It's probably like the most accessible version of this kind of deal that I can think of. Like Age of Empires is more accessible than, say, Civilization or Port Royal. That's another difference between RTSs and 4X and management games. RTSs are pretty complicated, but they're nowhere near as complicated as 4X. It's like, you do have to keep track of resources, but you don't have to keep track of like prices or anything like that. And Age of Empires, like didn't do anything particularly innovative, at least from my vantage point. Granted, not it's like not the biggest RTS fan, but Age of Empires is just a good, solid RTS series, including a side series, Age of Mythology, which is pretty literal in its interpretation. Instead of being about real world civilizations, or in this case, an approximation of real world civilizations. Like, you're probably not going to learn actual history from playing an Age of Empires game.
But I could have sworn that these things that did not exist at the same time totally fought each other in history.
I think later releases got better about that. But yeah, it's something that takes some liberties.
Yeah.
Adam, are you really telling me that the Aztecs never fought the Egyptians?
I don't recall that being in the history books.
They called it the Pyramid Wars. Don't you remember? I'm kidding.
Yes. Who had the best pyramids? Also, for an additional curveball, the Sumerians got into the equation. Although I'm trying to think if the Sumerians were an actual civilization.
They were.
Yeah. No, I mean in the Age of Empires.
Oh, in the games, I have no idea.
Yeah, I know the Sumerians were an actual civilization, but I mean, it's like, I think that it's like, because there's a lot of civilizations in all of the Age of Empires games, and the Age of Empires games does follow a track of history. Like the first Age of Empires games, basically like up to the Iron Age. That is to say, like a lot of early civilization, and the expansion pack was focusing on Rome. Yeah, it's like the original one was Stone Age to Iron Age, and then you had the Roman Empire. Age of Empires 2 is the Age of Kings, which is the Middle Ages. Age of Empires 3 is the Age of Exploration. This is this is where we get into the whole colonizing the Americas thing, and the expansion packs there gave us the Indian or Native American tribes, and the next one was about having early modern Asian civilizations there.
Mm-hmm.
And Age of Empires 4 is presumably going to go into maybe the Industrial Revolution, because, as I said, Age of Empires has come back. It's like Ensemble was dissolved after Halo Wars, but the brand was kept alive first by the not particularly impressive Age of Empires Online. If you don't remember that was one of Microsoft's early takes on a games as service platform,
with all that entails.
Yeah. And it's like, and clearly it wasn't successful because you can't access it anymore. It was a better attempt than their games, their live service Microsoft Flight Simulator thing. wasn't even a simulator. But Age of Empires Online, kept the torch alight, and it's got its fans. But a lot of people didn't like the whole always online aspect. They didn't like the going back to ancient civilizations. They didn't like the cartoony art style. There was a lot of reasons why Age of Empires Online was disliked. And, it looked like Age of Empires was going to lay fallow until, the HD re-release hit on Steam. And if you want to know the power of this brand, the HD version of Age of Empires has sold at least 2 million copies, maybe as many as 4 million, or that might be the number in total. It's the HD re-release literally sold millions of copies. It was enough where the Age of Empires 2 game started getting new expansion packs, like 15 years after the fact or whatever. That's, unprecedented at the time. It's, as things have marched forward, we had other games get this kind of deal, like Baldur's Gate, for example, but it's still fairly rare for an old game to get new content. Kind of a showcase of how powerful the brand is. And it was powerful enough where the other games are getting remakes or have gotten remakes. There's Age of Empires, the definitive edition. That's still on the Microsoft Store only. I think it's coming to Steam in a few months. Age of Empires 2 is getting another remake. It's called the definitive edition. Presumably that this is going to be the whole package. It's like the HD re-release and all the expansion packs that have been released since then into the new package. And I believe if you own the original Age of Empires 2 HD re-release, you can get the you'll be able to get this at a discounted price, which is not optimal, but better than paying full price for it. I don't know. It's like, honestly, I like the, if you own the original versions, you get the remaster for free. But different companies have different policies. Let's see. But Age of Empires 3 is getting a definitive edition, and Age of Empires 4 is in production. Although people are not exactly sure what's going on with that, because it's been a while since we've seen Age of Empires 4. Currently, that's being developed by Relic Entertainment. They of Warhammer fame. I'm trying to remember, because there are a lot of Warhammer games these days. God, sorry, I'm gonna have to look this up. Warhammer 40K. God. Relic. Sorry, live research. Yes. Relic. This what happens when you record live. Can't do a second pick.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Dawn of War. Sorry. Like I said, and I quite like the Dawn of War series. Although Dawn of War 3 didn't have the best of reactions. But yeah, Relic Entertainment is the closest thing we got to a modern day RTS specialist. I mean, they are an RTS specialist, but back 20 years ago, we had others, like, not just Ensemble, but you had Blizzard. It's hard to say if Blizzard still does RTSs, because I don't know the status of StarCraft.
They still own Warcraft and StarCraft. They just don't,
Yeah, I mean,
StarCraft 2 kind of didn't do great.
Yeah, in relation to the first one, and I it's like I'm trying to remember if the StarCraft Classic got released. I think it did, because StarCraft got remade. Because that's a popular thing to do these days. But and there were others like Westwood Studios. They have Command and Conquer fame, and Dune. Like they were pretty much like the pioneers of the whole genre. Barking Dog Studios, sort of. I'm like, and Cave Dog. Granted, they just made like the one, but it was one of the greatest RTSs of all time. Point is, the RTS genre was a lot more popular back then than it is now.
The thing is, the RTSs kind of merged into MOBAs, and then from there. So,
well, it's also because RTSs aren't the most. They're very at home at PCs and only PCs. Theoretically, you could do a mobile RTS, and you do have RTSs on mobile, but at best an iPad. Like doing an RTS on an iPhone is hand cramping, because you've got to take care of a wide range of area. And it works. It works arguably better than a console, but console ports of RTS games haven't really worked out either, because God, I think even more than an FPS, you really need a keyboard and mouse to handle an RTS. And it's not impossible. Like the Pikmin games are pretty good consoleized RTS games, or Overlord, but those are like very
when you do it, you have to come up with a way to handle your units, because you have to have more than one unit or it's not really an RTS. Like, for example, Pikmin does not have many different kinds of units, and between the different units, there are not many strong differences between them, aside from like some are stronger or faster or resistant to certain hazards.
Yeah. It's something that really requires a mouse and keyboard, because it was designed with those controls in mind. If you've ever played a console port of any RTS game that was born on a PC, you will know this. It's not as bad now, because modern consoles, like the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, have keyboard and mouse support. But it's more a issue of you're not going, you're not getting as many RTSs in general anymore. They're still being produced, but they tend to.
The other thing I think about RTSs is that you generally have a very in-depth and fairly complicated set of game systems, and people get used to those systems, and then don't like what happened with StarCraft. StarCraft was like, I won't say it was like perfectly fairly balanced, but it was very carefully balanced, and everyone was very used to the balances. And then they made a sequel, and it changed stuff, and people didn't like that. And that's not the only reason StarCraft 2 didn't do well, but not getting the uptake
and
is definitely part of it. And MOBAs have that worse than anything, where there's this huge new player lockout, because there are so many options that you can make, where really there's one or two correct choices, and it's not like you can freely choose between them. It depends on your team comp.
Yeah. It's also like Age of Empires, very notably with the first game, the Korean civilization was just flat out better than other civilizations, due to the way their unique bonuses played out. It was to the point where you could the Korean civilization was banned from online, or at least official online players, something like that. But I think that's an issue that's been remedied in the definitive version. But yeah, it's balancing is hard. And as far as Age of Empires 4 goes, again, we're waiting on new word for that because it's been a while since we've heard anything about it. Like, maybe we'll hear about it after the definitive versions of the old games are released. I'm not too worried about Age of Empires 4 getting canceled. It might get restarted, but to show you how valuable Age of Empires is to Microsoft, they've created a entire studio dedicated to managing the brand. Not a developer, but it's called like the Age of Empires Studio. They're the overseers of all the definitive versions and presumably Age of Empires 4 and anything else to do outside the brand, because there has been outside merchandising of Age of Empires. Like, there has been like a board game of Age of Empires, although that was like back 20 years ago. Point of order is, it's one of Microsoft's most powerful and popular game brands right now. Perhaps inexplicably so, considering how console-focused they've gotten over the years.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and I think you could access the Age of Empires, it's like Definitive Edition on the Xbox One. Once again, that's an area where my mind's kind of fuzzy on it. But, yeah. Age of Empires, great series. I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. And hopefully things go better than Dawn of War 3. Right, so that'll about do it for this installment of Silicon. The week ahead, let's see, coming up, we do have a Friday interview. Coming on Friday, September 20th, we will be having Bo and Cyril Lagerge of Guard Crush Games. And if you don't know who they are, they're one of the developers working on the upcoming Streets of Rage 4. I'm personally looking forward to this. I'm a big Streets of Rage fan, and I never thought I'd see the day when Streets of Rage 4 was actually a thing, because there have been a lot of attempts to make a Streets of Rage 4. And this one actually got off the ground. We might talk a bit about that on Friday, time permitting. We'll see what happens. Anyway, and on the Sunday reviews, planned for Renzo Racer, I think that's pronounced. Skee Ball for the Nintendo Switch and Rooms of Pandora. I have an axe to grind against Rooms of Pandora. Stay tuned for that on Sunday. And until then, I shall wish you good gaming.